Greetings. I am Simeon Livingston Holiday, a third-year business administration student from Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm doing my TED Talk on how using IP address analysis will fight digital fraud. IP address analysis is really going to be the future of technology and future of fighting fraud, because with fraudsters today, they can do a lot of their crime from the protection of their home or maybe the protection of a coffee shop. We're going to talk about how to get these trolls from out of their cave, one might say. So what is an IP address? Looking at an IP address, you can't really see much, can't really tell what it is, but the simple definition of an IP address is the location that you're sending data to, or the location that you're sending data from, be it your device, your computer, something like that. What can you really get from an IP address? Like I said earlier, just looking at one, you can't really get much. But the information IP address actually carries stuff like the internet address, which equals your location. An example of location could be city, like the city we are in, Tallahassee. Other thing you get from an IP address would be the internet number, being your device. That could be iPhone X, Galaxy 10 Plus, whatever device you might have. The final thing you might get from an IP address is the organization. Now, if you're at home using your internet, your organization might be AT&T, Spectrum, Time Warner, depending on what your internet provider is. But if you're at a place of business, the organization might be FAMU, Starbucks, etc., etc. Now, what can you do with an IP address? If you have the IP address, you can't really do much with it. But if you're using online resources such as whatismyipaddress.com, you can get information such as the organization name, the country the IP address is in, the state or region the IP address is in, the city the IP address is in, and the approximate latitude or longitude. These companies have the ability to give the exact latitude and longitude of these IP addresses, but they don't because of privacy concerns. You wouldn't want somebody to get your IP address, type it into Google, and then find your exact address, now would you? Now, what do businesses do with IP addresses? What you might not know is that every website you go onto logs your IP address and uses it for marketing analysis. What they might look at is people from a specific city, a specific state or region. What are they looking at on their website? What are they buying? How many of something are they buying? What's the demographics of, these people? But what businesses can also do with IP addresses through their website is block certain IP addresses. A lot of businesses don't block IP addresses because blocking an IP address in a way is like blocking a customer, They might be able to bring in money, but the problem is they might be able to take money away from the company. Now, how could IP address analysis be used today? First, we gotta discuss some frauds that IP address analysis can be used in to help. The first fraud we have is identity theft, which could be somebody taking your personal information and then using it pretending that they are you. An example of this is, you need your social security number to look at your credit score online. Now, when looking at your credit score online, when you're typing in your social security number, what these credit score websites can do is see the IP address from what you're signing into. Now, if it's the IP address, say, a coffee shop or something, or maybe even another state far away from your home, they see that and they know that your home IP address is in a different state because that's where you've signed in before, and they might temporarily block the IP address signing in that's in another state. This can prevent people from stealing your information that don't live in your area. We have email phishing scams. Email phishing scams is where people pretend to be fraudulent, or people pretend to be companies, but they're actually fraudulent, and they're using this information, these fake emails, to get you to give them real information, maybe credit card information, etc., etc. You can actually tell yourself if it's an email phishing scam. This is a original message from an email that I received on October 29th. By going into settings on your Gmail, if you're using Gmail, you can look for the original message. What the original message will give you under SPF is not your IP address, but the IP address the message was sent from. By using online resources like we talked about earlier, you can type in that IP address and get the approximate location of where this is coming from. But you can also get the organization name of where it's coming from. So say you got an email from the US military asking you to share some information, you use this IP address finder, you type it in, and you see that it's not coming from the US military, but it's coming from a totally different organization, you know that that might be a fraudulent email. Then there's chargeback fraud. This is a fraud that a lot of people have heard of because a lot of people actually commit this fraud. This is when somebody makes a purchase online and maybe it's a product, the product is being shipped to them. But while the product is being shipped to them, they call their bank and they say, oh, that was a fraud or theft, or it was an unknown charge, or it was the wrong or damaged item. What your bank will do is get in contact with the company that you were making a purchase from. They will take the money from that company and give the money back to you. But chances are, since you said it was a fraudulent activity, you still kept the product. Another thing, type of fraud is ad fraud. This is where fraudulent people can go into a website and implement their own ads into that website. And by implementing their own ads, they can collect money from users and also steal money from that website. A way we fight this fraud with IP address analysis is by finding the IP address of what the ad is located to. And when you find that IP address, the police and authorities can track it and essentially arrest the person who is putting in these fake ads. Can we actually go back to the slide before? I forgot to mention how we stop this. What these banks can do when they're looking for, when they're using IP address analysis is they can see where you're buying your product from. So if you are committing chargeback fraud, your bank can see like, you're buying your product from your home, and you said that this was a fraudulent purchase. Well, it's apparently not a fraudulent purchase if you actually buy it from your home. You go forward now. One more, please. So what we talked about, what banks can do to really protect, to make sure everything, to make sure you really have your best protection on their websites. So for online banking, what they can do is they can track the IP address from you're signing into to make sure what we talked about earlier, that is really coming from your home address or an address that you are usually at. If it's coming from a state that you're not in, they know to block that IP address for a certain amount of time, or maybe indefinitely. So with all of this, I came up with my own fraud fighting tactic with IP address analysis. The first step would be the website tracking IP address. So let's use an example, Amazon. The authorities call them, or bank calls them and say there's been a chargeback fraud and we're gonna need to collect money. Amazon doesn't want to give the money up so easily. So what Amazon does is they find the IP address of that purchase. Next step would be finding the location of the fraud. Well, with their IP address, they can either connect with the authorities or use online resources like we said earlier. They can find the approximate location of the fraud, or they can maybe find the organization name of the fraud. This could be the possible end. Say I said it was a chargeback fraud and the location goes back to your house. They know it really wasn't chargeback fraud, you're just trying to get over on the bank. But what if the location doesn't go back to your house? What if it goes to a different place? It may be a place like Starbucks. So let's say it does go to a Starbucks where there's a lot of Wi-Fi activity. What Starbucks can do is using their router and with the IP address that Amazon gave them, they can do a search through their website logs. And they can see at what time and what device was at that specific website doing that fraud. And with that, they'll secure evidence like the internet number, what we talked about earlier, which is really the device name, iPhone X, Galaxy, etc., etc. And that doesn't give you enough evidence to arrest somebody, but using evidence such as tying that back to your cameras maybe, and seeing if you could find the person who's using that device, and you can further question them later. There's some follow-up steps that they can do. Amazon, they can retrieve the IP address of the device from Starbucks, and they can ban it. so they can make sure that nobody is ever using that again. Another thing they can do, Starbucks can ban the IP address of that device to make sure they don't come there to do any fraudulent stuff. And like I said earlier, the questioning of the suspects. So another idea would be having a database for the IP address of the fraudsters. Now with this, you can store and track all the IP addresses where fraud was committed, and that way you can see which device fraud came from, or the person fraud happened to, or the organization a lot of fraud happens. With this, we can see a lot of people are repeat fraudsters. So we know that if this device has had fraud happen before, chances are it will happen again. The only problem with having a database like this, there's zero guarantee. The reason there's zero guarantee is because of things, VPNs, virtual private networks. What a VPN does is it takes the information from your computer that's sitting out, aka your IP address, and then it encrypts it. And then it sends that IP address to a VPN server, and from there, you're searching the web. Now, when using the website to see what the IP address is coming from, they're gonna get back the VPN server. What they can't do is they can't track you because of the strong encryption. The problem is VPN servers, they tend not to like with authority. They tend not to like to work with authorities. So when authorities come to them asking to see who has been doing this fraudulent activity, VPN servers say things like, "We're not keeping logs. I'm sorry, we can't help you." And the problem with this is that VPNs are becoming more and more popular. In 2015, the VPN market was about $15 billion. Today in 2019, it's about $27 billion. In about 2025, it's gonna reach up to about $35 billion. This means more and more fraudsters will be able to hide their criminal activity from their home based on VPNs. And unfortunately, there's no way you can track the original IP address if you're using a VPN. So there's only one thing that we can do to really stop this. And that one thing would be banning VPNs in America. There's other countries that have banned VPNs, such as China, Russia, Saudi Arabia. And with the banning of VPNs, fraudsters haven't been able to hide in their country as much. Now, just by banning VPNs, people will still use VPNs in this country, but it will be less people using them in this country. And also, if we ban them, we can also, America and authorities can force these companies to give us their logs. And this is the only way to truly prevent digital fraud. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I am Simeon Livingston Holiday, a third-year business administration student, and I'm logging off.